Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Shed Geek Podcast, and back for round number 2, and the applause goes wild. By popular demand, Johnathan Ulrich.
Well, good to be back. It's Justin, if you remember.
I was about to say, is it Justin or is it Jonathan? So I'm so confused now because I'm going to say the wrong thing, meaning to say the right thing.
I've been called many nicknames. I've never been called Justin before, so thanks for starting that.
Oh, you know how bad I felt? Not bad at all.
Yeah, not bad at all. It was fun. Like, if you can't laugh at yourself, then it's we're not doing something right.
What was it we did? George, what was it? What was the name?
I called you back and called you a different name, like Mark or something. I forget. But, hey, Mark.
It was good.
We had fun.
My apologies.
Well, good to be back on the show, and good to be back with you. So
yeah, you. Well, the listeners really loved what you had to say before. Listeners love what you have to say. Want to have you back to say some more stuff. And you had a really high listener count, and I love that. So obviously you have some things to offer. What you got cooking in the pot today?
Well, so I was thinking ahead, what should we talk about today? Obviously, you lead the conversation, and that's where we'll go.
Okay.
I think I try to be transparent, and if there's any way I can bring value in our time here together, that's what I want to do. So
that's great.
We're all in the same boat. We're in the same industry, whether in the rent-own side or shed side or, wherever you find yourself. And so to me, if you become better, if I could become better, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. We'll start there. Some people are in the rent-own industry, but some people are in other parts of the industry as too. What's your thoughts on it? I'm curious. You've been through this before. You own shed companies. You know what I mean? Like, you've done rent-own.
Yep.
Is it, Stephen Byler was on an episode recently, and he was talking about being vertically integrated and how Byler Barnes did that for 50 years. Awesome guy. Mm-hmm. Crazy cool story. Just super vulnerable and like one of those guys you want to hang out with whenever you're around him.
Steve's a great guy.
But, he talked about being vertically integrated. What's your thoughts on that? Give me a transparent, is that the best way to go? Like, do you think that's the answer?
Yeah, so I'm not here to say there's a right or wrong way to do this.
Sure.
I can only tell you from my personal experience, along with, I can tell you our numbers, but I can also tell you not numbers, but I can tell you a lot of other companies that I've looked at in the industry. Some were friends, some were acquisition targets, that the most distressed companies in times of, let's say, a recession or, high growth, if you don't have problems, grow and you will have problems, right?
Yeah.
And so the more things you are doing, unless you've really taken the time to build out an independent leadership team on that business, so say you're a shed company, you grow to 5 million, 2 million, 42 million, 100 million, whatever that number is, unless you've really built out an independent leadership team and it runs sort of without you as the owner, and oftentimes, I'm an owner and I'm a visionary, and we think it's running way more without us than it actually is. I don't mean that to pump us up.
Sure.
I mean that to actually tear me down. In other words, I didn't do as good of a job actually setting up systems and processes as I thought I did, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I'll tell you is that in my family's business, when I purchased it, it was the same way. Those companies who are doing rent-to-own and sheds and really trying to be I'm a big believer in vertically integrated in controlling customer experience. Mm-hmm. So for us, we have our own equipment for installs and deliveries, et cetera. And a lot of the shed industry is not that way. Just the level of experience that we want to deliver for us, it feels like the right thing. But it's a different business, right? Sheds, rent-to-own, they're related, but it's a different business. You got to think of it as running a bank and running manufacturing and retail.
Well, because there are people that individually make a good living in those particular sectors, this leg of the table, but then there are some that scale up all of those legs, and that can become very cumbersome.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what I've seen in financials. It was true of my family's business when I bought it, as well as, multiples of other companies that I've looked at. When you actually get down to the financials, those who are in multiple tend to be leaving a lot of juice in the lemon, so to speak. Maybe people don't like lemons, but a lot of chips on the table, or a lot of profit to be had, because they are running and trying to run both. So I'll tell you straight up. I mean, my family's business, when I purchased it, we were 40% pass-through and rent-to-own contracts. And if you're just if you're a rent-to-own provider listening to this, you go, that's crazy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is crazy, right? One of the acquisitions we did was 38%, right? I mean, so it's really, really easy because it's not the same kind of business, and it takes a different skill set to manage a bank or a rent-to-own company. I know it's not a bank, but it's still collections and accounts, et cetera, as it does a manufacturing company. And it's really about focus. And I'll tell you that in my company, we have two complete different operational, I got a president for the backyard leasing business, a president for the lifestyle structures business, the sheds and cabins. But even just being in sheds and cabins, there are quite a few folks that through the pandemic have scaled pretty incredible because they were focused, right? And so anytime you get split focus, you got to ask yourself the question, am I going to be really, really, really good at all of that? Or maybe I need to focus or am I going to be mediocre at all of it in reality? Or could I be really good at just one thing? So Jack Welch's old thing, if you read his book when he was at GE, you remember what he said? Not everybody loved Jack Welch, but a lot of people
did. Was that the You Don't Know Jack? That was a different book. Okay. I'm thinking of...
honestly, it's been a minute since I read his book, but he talked about the concept if we're not number one or number two. This is a multinational company, but still, if we're not going to be number one or number two in any particular segment of the business where we compete in, we're going to sell it. We're going to get out of it. Because he believed in becoming phenomenal at what they do. And if we're not winning in something and we're not able to get to where we're really number one or number two in performance, then we're not, and he was also talking about market share. But just look at performance. Maybe you're not trying to be a $200 billion business or a, like Jack was, or a $20 million business. But if you're not truly serving your team members well, your clients well, and ultimately your shareholders, maybe it's just yourself as a shareholder, then you got to stop and ask, what am I really trying to do here? And think about it. More than anything, I would just say, be strategic, know what you're doing, and understand the impact that it has when you do multiple things. It's not good or bad, just understand it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's been a skewed view from somebody who comes in and makes their living in just that one vertical because they don't really have any intentions on going beyond that. Mm-hmm. That's not bad. That just means they're trying to make a living. They enjoy what they do. But there are other people out there who are seeking their share. Right. I mean, really, they are. And it's not because we're not still trying to make the market bigger so that we can all share a little bit more. But there are people who are trying to constantly improve their methods, their services, the what they provide to the customer. And that's where acquisitions come in. I mean, we're seeing more of that. Mm-hmm. I'm hearing rumblings of so many different companies that have either been approached, considered, that's...
Yeah, the industry is at a maturation stage, and so anytime we get to in the bell curve, we get to maturation, it's going to start happening more and more and more. So
you think we'll see more of that definitely over the next year or two?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I think we'll see a lot more of it.
So what would your advice be to someone who is, I'm thinking about getting into this, I'm thinking about getting into that, we want to expand our business out? Is it consulting?
We're thinking about, you're saying a shed manufacturer is thinking about getting...
I want to get a rent-own. I want to start running my own truck. I want to start, you know what I mean? Like, is there a place to go for that? Like, hey, I need to know.
I got you. Okay, is there someone I can reach out to?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I think just understand it's not going to be as easy to be great at all of it as what it seems like, number one.
Yeah.
Number two, consider the impact it has. I mean, you only have so much, in EOS we call this the capacity ball. You only have so much time and energy in a day. And if it takes, really as an owner, you need about 70%.
You told me this early on. You told me this early on, and I've not forgotten this.
But if you're at 80 or 90 or 110% of your capacity, well, we're lying to ourselves. You cannot actually be at 110%. That doesn't exist.
Right.
Long term, you're either going to burn out.
Yep.
Something's going to fall through the cracks. Profitability is going to slip somewhere. Culture is going to slip somewhere. Employees, customers aren't going to be happy. Something's going to happen. Yeah. So I think first of all, you got to understand it, think through it, consider the costs. And I think of the story of the parable of the talents in Scripture, right? Where the master entrusted with his employees, if you put it in today's dollars, I think it was $1 million, $2 million, and $5 million or something like that of dollars. It's pretty significant if you go to the translation. But think of it just as talents even. I have the ability to run a good rent-own company or a good shed company. And if you're good, really, really good at one thing, then maybe it's time to go start looking at something else to add on to that. But I would definitely encourage, for whoever's listening to this, if you're not in both right now, not to scare you from getting from one to the other, just understand what it is. I mean, we are in both, but I'll tell you that we could have made probably another 10, 20 million bucks bottom line over the past 20 years had we been focused.
Maybe there's a room. Maybe, I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking in my head, maybe there's room for, somebody to fill that gap. I always see like so many different opportunities in the industry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To me, it's not always just, and nothing against building a shed, nothing against hauling or selling sheds. I'm just saying it's not just always that.
Right.
As the industry begins to mature, I'm over here going, oh, there's something over there. We talked about shed selling. Mm-hmm. We want to create a shed sales, seminar, whatever. We're going to give it some kind of name because it's lost in identity. But, there's so many
Justin.
Tables.
Justin, the shed sales guy.
Yeah. I'll do it. I'll give some nice little acronym with it. But there's so many people who do get into these different legs of the table, and they're represented equally. The haulers, they do a good job, the builders and all that. But the salespeople sometimes, and your SDRs are just kind of like, they're in a fishbowl a lot of times, and there's not professional development there. Mm-hmm. And I think people want that, but then you got to find a new way to do that. You got to find a way to add value. No one's going to go to anything that doesn't add value. So I don't know why I got on this rabbit hole.
But so on your question, if there's consulting or anything that I know, not that I really know, I mean, anybody's always welcome to call me, and all I can do is tell you the mistakes we've made and a couple of successes, but a lot of mistakes.
Yep.
And so happy to share those things with anybody if that helps in any way.
That space is ready to be taken. I guess what I was saying, where I was going with it was talking about the shed sales. They were talking about, like, I said, listen, this was an opportunity. A year ago, there was an opportunity to handle labor. I mean, what happened whenever COVID hit? Mm-hmm. When COVID hit, you had 12, 14, 16-week lead times.
Yeah.
And everyone I knew was crying, labor. We can't keep enough inventory. We can't build enough. Perfect opportunity for someone who felt like they had the vision for it to try and help solve that need. It'd be the same way with sales. Now, I don't know what the answer is. So when people say, well, what is the answer? I have no idea. Wasn't called to do it. Don't know how.
But here's a couple of ideas. I always tell people, ask me for my opinion. It's worth what you paid for it. It's free, so it may be worth nothing. Yep. But sometimes it's like when you're trying to figure out what color to paint a room, and you ask your wife, you like this color, blue or gray, and you don't really know what you like, and then she says gray, and you go, I like the blue, right? Sometimes it's just having somebody voice something sparks an idea. So I'm always happy to sort of visionate, if that word is a real word.
We just create words here on the Shed Geek podcast.
Yeah, I love it. So visionate with other industry folks, and be a help in wherever I can. So one of the best ways to learn, I think, though, on your question, is learn from other people's mistakes.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I've seen some Facebook memes that say such a thing. Yeah. That's my favorite way of learning, is watching it. You know what? If you're a younger sibling, you see that.
Yeah.
I did it. I've watched my son do this.
Yep.
He watches my daughter get in trouble, and he's like, yep, going a different route.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in this. I mean, last week I was in, I had 10 different industry meetings, and a lot of them were just industry friends, me going, learning. I always, there's no one, there's got to be something I can learn from every single factory I stop in, retail store, dealer, or whatever it is. And it's even that lot you go to that's just run down and you can tell the owner doesn't really care about it. There's something you can learn there, right? Yeah. Good that they're doing, because everybody has a strength
somewhere. Learn what not to do.
And so I was in 10 different meetings last week in I don't know, 4 or 5 states. And so I'm a big believer in doing this. There's not time to go out and do it every month or every quarter, but once a year I try to get on the road and go out and meet and greet people, and break bread together with people in the industry and sort of sit down, how things are going. I mean, things are very, they're shaping up to be very different in the next, I think, 12 months versus what they are right now.
You guys heard that? Justin Ulrich may just come to your come to your lot. You heard it right here. Ma, come check it out. It's Justin. I can't quit. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that I said that.
If you're not watching this on YouTube or somewhere and you can't see my face, you won't know if it's Justin or Jonathan, right? That's going to stick now. So yeah, I mean, I think go out, learn from others, and again, people were typically happy to share mistakes, and that's some of the best stuff to learn from. So, anyways,
no, it's other areas that people just don't pay attention to. We talked a lot about like CPAs and knowing your numbers, know their self, and things like that. Me and you had conversation about like legalities.
Yeah,
I mean, there's certain areas that we're just exposed in the industry, and I don't know, maybe that's there again, and you know what I mean. Seeing that there's another option for someone to come in and take over that. I mean, obviously the MBSRA has, value to offer there in terms with the general
on the
counsel.
rent-own side. Yep.
Yeah, with rent-own, with rent-own. But then, what do you do about? I'm a company that's trying to get started. What do I need to know about liability? What do I need to know about employees? How do I need to structure this? DBA, LLC. What am I doing? S corp, C corp. What are those things? And who's the right person to tell me what they are? So,
well, a really good. I think the first misnomer I see a lot in the industry is people go, so where's your profit? What are you making? What's this? What's that? And they go CPA. And what it took me a long time, here's another mistake you can learn from me. It took me a long time to realize my CPA only takes my box of receipts I take to him, so to speak, and puts it in a nice report that looks cool, right? They're not making anything up. If you don't know it, they don't know it. Yeah. And so the first thing is an attorney, a corporate attorney who knows corporate law, knows structure around LLC from a liability standpoint is very different from a tax attorney who goes, hey, because you're in this state and do business across the border and et cetera, and are you ever going to sell the company? Are you going to hold it? Are you going to donate it to charity when you're done? I mean, that's all makes a difference on if you should be an LLC, a C Corp. You should definitely be incorporated, though, because if you're not incorporated, all the liabilities of the company are your personal liabilities, right? Someone stubs a toe and sues you, you're going to be personally sued. So definitely number one thing is get out there and get a LLC or some kind of incorporation. And then when you get into a lot of some of the other things that you mentioned, I'll just run through them quickly. Labor law. You have, on the shed side of the business, you have labor law, you have IRS, you have, unless you got your top line volume is 20 million, 40 million, 80 million plus, you probably don't need to worry about audited financials unless you have investors. If you have investors, you really probably want audited financials, and to do that, you're going to have an ERP system, and it takes a lot to get into that system. But the number one thing I think I see talking about as an industry being exposed or being naked on this is probably around labor. I think that's the biggest gap that we have still in the industry, and a lot of people, a wise old man once told me, if you're doing something just for tax, it's probably not the right thing to do. So, I try to take every tax loophole that I can. I think Jesus said, pay unto Caesar his dues. If we convert that into U.S. dollars, pay unto Caesar every dollar you owe him. But he didn't say plus $2, right? Yeah. He said, pay him what you owe him, and that's it. Yeah. So 100%, and the IRS tax code is actually set up and structured to incentivize us as business owners to invest in capital expenditures, to grow our companies. I mean, that's a great thing. But then there's some things that it's not meant for, right? And so we see a lot of, and no judgment, we used to be 1099 manufacturing across the board, until one day I talked to a labor law attorney, and that was the start of it, and figured out, maybe not the correct way to do things. They're not providing their own space. They're not providing their own tools. Yeah, hammer and nail bag doesn't really count as tools, because you really need a forklift and a chop saw and ladders and a factory and these types of things. And I've seen some creative things over the years, people renting a bay to employees, and it gets complicated, it gets deep. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you made more money by paying people's employees, would you still pay them 1099? That's the question to ask yourself. And if it's no, maybe have a conversation. And why do I care about this? I care about this because I don't want you or me to ever have a run-in with, name the three-letter word, IRS. IRS or Department of Labor, the DOL, or any entity, and be on the wrong side because frankly, it's a penalty for you. May cost you your business, but it also hurts me and everyone else in the industry, right? So being completely above board, I'm a big believer in treating our people right. We're all W-2 with incentive comp plans. We have benefits. We have workers' comp, and we make sure we follow, sort of cross the T, dot the I. But it costs a lot of money, and it took us a minute to get there, right? We didn't just turn the switch one day and we were there, because we would have went out of business if we would have. We had to adjust margins. We had to adjust prices. I mean, it does cost more to have all those things.
But you see it as investing into your employees, investing into your business.
Frankly, for me, and a lot of the industry is conservative, Anabaptist, et cetera. I mean, frankly, for me, I want to be able to lay my head down at night and know there's nothing I have to hide from anybody. I may have figured out the tax code and figured out the way to write off this asset on my taxes this year. And a lot of that's actually pretty straightforward, pretty black and white in the IRS code. But I want something that if I'm ever in court, I can defend it, right? And I can defend it with a third-party opinion, and it's not a stretch to get there because the IRS is probably not going to stretch with you.
What's the lure of like the 1099?
I think a lot of us in the industry just do it. It's easy. There's no W-2, no payroll withholdings, no payroll taxes. It's cheaper. You don't have to pay all those extra fees. Employees, it's easier to hire employees because you're paying them a 1099, which can be a higher wage because you don't have all those extra costs. And so,
I mean, there are some details to 1099, just some generic details like you're not supposed to set a schedule for them. Little things like that. Right. That even sometimes a 1099 employee might not understand themselves.
Yep. So anyways, I'm not trying to, I just think we as an industry, it's something to think about and know the true consequences. Every decision has a consequence, right? You go over the top the other way, the consequences, your costs are going to be higher than they need to be, right? And that has a consequence. And so it's just really being diligent and thinking through those things.
Here's the way I explained it, kind of like, especially in terms of working in sales, because in sales, a lot of times you work in commission. Sometimes that can be a draw against commission. Sometimes it can be just straight commission. Most sales guys who are doing a good job in the top 5%, they want straight commission. They don't want a mixture. They don't want a base and moving forward. But sometimes you have to start somewhere or whatever it looks like, to gain general knowledge of an industry or product or something. But I would always ask this question. I've asked this to, even employers before. How much do you want to grow this year? Let's say you hire me. Johnathan, you're hiring. Let's do this transparency stuff. Me and you like to do these things. I don't know what it is. So Johnathan, you hire me today and you say, okay, I want you to go out and grow my business 30%. So I'm hiring you to do a job, right? I'm hiring you to go out and grow 30%. So if I come, there's a negotiation there, right? Yep. There's leverage, and you can say, okay, I'm going to come on. I'm going to do that. You want that done in the next 12 months, correct? I'm curious at your response on this. I feel like we may disagree, but I'm not sure. I'm just curious.
Let's find out,
okay.
Justin.
Yeah. I'm never living it down. So, okay, I'll do it. You want this done over the next 12 months, correct? What happens if I do it in 3 months?
So an incentive for performing in a shorter time frame.
Sure. If we talk about it initially at the onset, that's fine. But what if you say, I need to grow 30% in the next 12 months? And I say, okay, what happens if I go out and grow 30% in the next 3 months, for instance? What if I tell you I'm going fishing for 9 months? Is that okay with you?
Well, it depends what job you're hired to do, right? If you're in a seat where...
Well, if I'm not W-2.
If you're in a seat, right. So technically... I should be okay with that. Now, even 1099, if I hire a garage door installer to install garage doors,
always use a painter as an example. So
or a painter to come and paint the paint the sheds. Yeah. If you're not painting the sheds and now I can't install it in revenue, I'm gonna find another painter.
Yeah,
right.
Of course.
So I mean, at some point,
there's a consequence to the opposite side of it.
We don't buy Fords because they break down or whatever, Dodge. I'm not trying to start an argument. I'm just saying whatever brand you think isn't, we have an opinion about what lasts and what doesn't. So there are consequences for performance, regardless of really how you're set up long term. Sometimes in the interim, short term, it doesn't show up. But
it's certainly important at the onset to have those discussions.
There you go.
You know,
That's
because if you don't have those discussions, you failed to plan, you plan to fail, right? You know, if you
every goal you don't set, you will hit. You know, if you have a goal to go nowhere, you will end up there.
And it's so hard sometimes to ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right?
Huge.
If you can spend a lot of time doing that, it's kind of like the age old, you know, what was it, Allen Iverson? Practice. We're talking about practice. We're not talking about the game. We're talking about practice. You remember this video, and it was talking about, but practice is the most important. The game is really irrelevant in terms of practice. You practice for 40 hours, you play a game for 1.
Right.
Practice is the most important. So you talk about and get those details nailed down previously. The only reason I thought that was so important is because this is what I have found in most 1099 capacities. Bring me in, I'll grow your business, 12 months. What if I grew it in 30% in 3 months? And I tell you, hey boss, I'm gonna go fishing. I want to take some time off now. Wait a minute. You know, we still got 9 months left. Right. But we hit our target. You know what I mean? We already hit our target. So I value freedom.
Right.
I value time off.
That's shared expectations. I think if you're hiring a contractor to do the landscaping at your house, or and I didn't do well at that. You know, I think I'm a year into our project right now. We're finally wrapping up next week. It's always next week.
It's always next week. Yeah.
But shared expectations, and for sure, if you're working with friends and family, if you value the relationship, value it enough to actually sit down and write down ahead of time, if I meet the target in 3 months, you know, do you get more money for that? Or
you know what
can I take
assumptions
9 months off? Or assumptions make an ass out of you and me. Assumptions, right? Think about how it's written. 100%.
Whenever you don't get into those details, and sometimes that's just the learning curve that you do.
Document, detail, talk about it ahead of time, because everyone is a lot more agreeable going in than they're on the backside when I think I've performed and you don't think I have, or vice versa, et cetera. So communication is key. And then I'm also a big proponent on one more thing: document it.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And that's to protect the relationship. Because if we agree on something,
I've seen the importance in that.
The last thing I want to happen is 6 months from now, 6 years from now, there's a disagreement and we're great friends and partners, but we didn't document something that's now become a big deal, and it puts a rift in the relationship. And that's just, so I always say, don't do business with people you can't trust with a handshake, but then value the relationship enough to document what you've agreed upon.
Yeah.
So, I try to live my life that way. You could talk to Steve or Willard or, you know, team members on the senior leadership team, et cetera. And I think that's what you're going to find.
Absolutely great advice. I wish, there's so many times I wish I could go back and be like, oh no, if we could just do that over again. I think about friendships that could be better, business relationships that could be better. I mean, there's so many things that could be better with communication. So if you're the contractor or the subcontractor and you listen to this, that's something you can do, right? You can say, hey, I value this relationship. Let's document it so we're clear in the future. And I think the other thing on just that whole topic and conversation is, as owners, you got to really think about, what are we building, right? Are you trying to build a legacy are you trying to own your own job, right? Are you trying to grow top line to a couple $1 million and you make 100, 200, 300 grand a year and you own your own job? That's what some people want to do. You want to grow it and sell it. Are you trying to create a great culture and hand it off, and sell it to employees? Or do you want to hand it off as a legacy to your kids? What are you really trying to do? And that makes a difference. And I will tell you that if an exit is in your future, everything that you don't have buttoned up, like benefits or W-2, 1099, those are going to be, add backs or takeaways, right, from your earnings, because they're going to adjust it to actually be able to go run above board and et cetera. And so it's something to think about for your long-term value as well. Yeah, no, everything that you're saying is like stuff that's in my wheelhouse right now. It's stuff that I think about. And I try to take a better approach moving forward. The best advice, for me is documentation. Like you said, documentation. What's your best avenue? What do you feel like when you're giving suggestions, what is the best thing that you say is a direction to go? From a legal perspective, like where do you start from the ground floor? Well, I mean, so entity, you're talking about entity, LLC, et cetera. Yeah. I mean, LLCs nowadays, pretty much in every state, are very straightforward and a great way to go. Unless you're going to put it in the trust and hand it off to the kids, and then you want to do it when the company's worth nothing, for gift tax purposes. So you don't want to grow something and then gift tax it. Yeah. But we're all LLCs. And through the acquisitions, we ended up with C Corps, S Corps, LLCs, et cetera. And it cost a lot of money. We did that a couple years ago to unravel all that,
and even though I owned it on both sides, flipping it from a C corp to an LLC, I had to get a fair market value today, and I had to pay income tax on that. Now I had the tax basis on the other side.
Just the stuff you're talking about serves as a perfectly good example of how robust being in business looks like. Yep. It's not just always.
It's complicated sometimes.
It can, especially if you're wanting to scale.
The challenge is to not let the legal and all these things get in the way of serving your customer. But that also means you have to structure it right so in the future it's not a distraction, because, I don't want to pay any attention to the IRS, but the fact is they want to pay attention to me. Yeah. Right? So they don't forget about me.
Yeah.
So Uncle Sam wants his money.
87,000 new ones.
That's right.
It sounds like to focus on you.
Since we've redefined what a recession is, we can spend that money instead on new IRS agents.
I was about to say, have we come to a conclusion ourselves on what a recession is?
I don't know. Is it 2 months or 4 months of GDP decline?
I don't know.
Wikipedia literally redefined this, and they locked it. Yeah, they literally, after the administration came out and said it's not 2 months of decline because that's what we had, and that's when you call a recession. But nope, we're not in a recession. Gotta love it. And so Wikipedia redefined on their page, and they locked it for comment. A friend of mine has screenshots, and they got a lot of public feedback, lashback, so they had to open it back up.
I thought Wikipedia was like pretty common. Like you could pretty well change it with very little resistance.
You can, except when it's locked.
Okay.
And somebody up high enough cares
enough
apparently
to
it's sort of locked down.
I got you. So it's no longer available.
So you talk, do a reverse podcast for 2 seconds.
Okay.
You talk in the industry a lot. What's the sense you're getting that may be interesting to me and probably to our listeners?
Oh gosh, I'm in the hot seat.
Where are we headed right now from an industry? We had a lot of growth through the pandemic. We had a lot of crazy lumber prices and et cetera, but we also had tailwinds, right? Demand was high, lead times were long, not just for us, but also for suppliers, et cetera. What's the temperature in the industry right now, would you say?
So, I mean,
are things slowing down? Are they stable? Are we going gung-ho to the future?
It seems like stability is increasing, but slowdown is reality. Coming off of the 2 years that we came off of them. It's definitely changing. The industry, in my eyes, seems to be changing. I feel like there's going to be buyouts, acquisitions. I think so in order to grow, you have to me, at some point, you have to affect supply and demand. I mean, there has to be, there are companies who just want to do more. There are companies fine with staying steady, but I think the companies who want to do more will take more of a market share. But I don't think that's because they're like, hey, I got it out for you and I don't want you to win. Right. I think it's a maturing of an industry. I mean, you saw it with the auto industry. What happens. I mean, there's a reason why Chrysler's not around anymore. I mean, those things just happen, but they don't have to happen on bad terms.
Right.
But I think it just depends on, take a look at some of your core leadership. As I was reading them whenever I was on here, it sounds very, like staunch, but grow or die, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's one of your core values. Yeah, one of your core values. And I'm reading them as I was sitting there in the lobby. But I mean, to some extent, you have to be constantly moving upward. But some people,
it's a law of nature. If you're not growing, you are dying, right?
Yeah. And some people say, well, Paul talks about contentment, right, in the Bible, and I feel like
contentment is great gain.
Yeah, I feel like I'm on a search for contentment that says, what is content? Like, I'm in 6, 7, 8 partners deep right now and more that I'm talking to, and a lot of people are gonna have a lot of opinions on that. Me and you talked about this before. Yeah, I'm not good at being the duck that lets it roll off my back. I kind of get in my feelings, and then you know what I mean? I sulk, and then I get over it.
You'll be nice when you call Shannon, right?
Yeah, please be nice. Please be nice to me. So the reality is that's who I am, and it's my nature through and through to the core. But I don't. At the same time, like until I'm challenged, I feel like I don't owe anyone an explanation to some extent. Like everyone's trying to do better and do better for themselves. But if you ask me, with a gun to my head, what do you like to do the most out of all these partnerships? I love all these guys. I love this. Right. I love the podcast. I love talking to people, and I love hearing their stories. I love go visiting them at their house, sitting down with them and break bread.
I often ask people if they're struggling in their career or business or a friend or whatever it is, and I go, if I gave you $1 million a year to do whatever you wanted, what would you do? What was that for you?
Oh, the podcast. There's not a doubt in my mind. I love building the relationships. You know,
you do really love us all that much, huh?
Well, if it provides money, that's great. But I think I'm a little bit of a natural historian. One of the things that attracted me to the industry the most was kind of like, hey, where'd your story come from? Like I've told people, hey, your dad was originally from Southern Illinois. You guys were in Kentucky. You were in the mission field. So if someone asked me about you, I find that interesting because as I travel about
it's a story.
Yeah. Yes, it's exactly what I'm the most interested in. I think I'm a bit of a historian geek, really, when it comes down to it. Cook portable buildings, cook sheds were like one of the biggest names whenever we were growing up. No one ever knew what anything else was. Yep. They started in like 84, 86 or something in Cobden, and I lived in Southern Illinois, and everybody called it. The Leonard. But, you know, it was one of those things where cook shed was it. Like I was selling Irvin Stutzman's buildings. They were Summit portable buildings out of Farmington, Missouri, and they would come onto my lot and they would say, what kind of cook sheds you got here? And I was like, oh, well, these are actually, you know, Summit portable buildings. Summit cook shed, huh? And it was like, no. You know, so that's all it was. It was just an outbuilding. And, you know, I'm sure that, you know, it sounds like Greg Cook did a great job building this you know, this thing. Yeah. My brother bought one from him at one point. I had this really cool story about how me and my brother totally redneck moved this thing because my dad bought it off of him for $500.
You were a missing RTO?
Totally. He paid for it.
Okay. Just clarifying.
Yeah. It changed his name to Johnathan Ulrich and skipped town.
Right.
But no, we moved it on a 6x12.
Oh, wow.
Tilt bed with a HD 2500 Dodge Ram. We strapped the frame down because we were afraid the pin wouldn't hold it, and set it on angle iron, and like a couple of rednecks moved it 14 miles, where we watched my father-in-law about kill himself with a Kubota tractor trying to pull this thing off because we didn't even know what a shed hauler was.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, this is probably 2002 or something like that, and we just didn't know. We didn't have the number of the guy who delivered it, but no, those were just cool stories. I didn't know that I'd be in this industry at one point, but I really do love hearing their stories. So it gets beyond just the shed that they talk about, and it starts to become how they know this guy and how they know this guy. And
the connections.
Yes.
A small world. It's a small world, period. And then when you overlay an industry or a religion or a name, household name, or a family name, or whatever it starts.
Simon Sinek talks about Find Your Why. Dave Miller from SmartPay turned me onto that book.
Yep.
You know, go read this book. I love Simon Sinek. You know, I will watch videos of his. You know what I mean? Till 1 o'clock in the morning. Very good. He does these little 3-minute deals. Genius. Yep. You know, it's perfect timing. So I love going and listening to that. But he talks about finding your why. I mean, so what is your why? I mean, I'm a relationship builder and a historian at heart. All the rest of the stuff to me is, I don't want to say details, but it really is.
Right.
It helps the listeners more than it helps me. I'm more interested in building the relationship and finding out, how'd you get here? Like, what's going on? How did this happen? And I don't know. It's just cool to me. Yeah. And maybe that's weird, but that's who I am.
No, it's great. I love that you're so passionate about it.
I'm glad that you asked the question because usually people don't. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I think I went and visited with quite a few companies recently, and just sort of what I'm seeing and hearing. I definitely agree with you. I think there's a stabilization, slowdown. Materials are stabilizing more, but are they going to stay stable? I mean, when we went in the pandemic, we were a few friends I visited with this past week. You know, they were very long in lumber, and we were very lean, right? So we were the lean manufacturer with just-in-time inventory, and it was one of our scorecard measurables every week, because we can't be above this number on the balance sheet for inventory. We really watched it like a hawk. And as we went in the pandemic, I thought, hey, this is great. My buddy's got 8 months of supply. I've got like 6 days. Not quite that extreme, but I've got 6 days. He's got 8 months, and if the market drops, I'm going to be able to buy cheap if we can still sell sheds. And what do you know? The entire thing exploded, and supply chain became an issue, and he's sitting in all the material. He probably made more money on having material in stock than he did on the sheds he sold, right? Yeah. Could have not built a shed and made more money.
Yep.
And we were the opposite way. And so it's really interesting going forward. I mean, sort of what's worked in the status quo, or what's worked as status quo in the industry, it's not going to work in the future, right? Whether it's material purchasing, whether it's retail stores, online, the mix of business, it's unique because you go to the grocery store space. I mean, Amazon is opening some retail stores, right?
Yeah.
And DoorDash. I mean, they did phenomenal. If you go look at their stock ticker and look at what they did incredible during the pandemic. Guess who's opening grocery stores?
Yeah.
DoorDash.
Yeah.
And cool. Guess who's getting a delivery service? I don't remember. I'll botch it. Either Albertsons or Kroger, right? I mean, so just everybody's starting this mishmash that I think we're going to see in the industry as well, and we're all trying to figure it out. And
there's changes that are inevitable in every industry. I'm getting ready to lose my listener count with this one. You ready? All right.
Shoot.
Okay, this is where it goes. Are you a fan of self-checkout at Walmart?
I'm not a fan of Walmart.
Well, that's the best answer. Like, so many people are like, I hate the self-checkout. And I watch these comments on these things constantly, and I'm like, why? Like, why hate the self-checkout? And it's like, it's usually something like, it's costing jobs. I'm like, the number one employer in the United States is costing jobs. I'm like,
right.
we need to think this through just a little bit more. Right. Like, they're changing with the status as things happen. It's kind of like we used to have full-service gas stations. Now we have self-service gas stations.
I love that when we go international. I said I love that about traveling international. Full-service gas.
Full-service gas. Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's just certain things that change. It's like I tell people, well, if you're mad at me for self-checkout, you'll be really mad to find out I take my own cart back too. So I'm putting all kinds of people out of work, It's just one of those things where I'm like business changes, but there's so many reasons to hate Walmart. Yep. Trust me, self-checkout is not one worth wasting your time on.
Right.
But it's the nature of the way business changes. We're seeing new technologies. They saw, new technologies in the 70s and the 80s, and we're seeing that now. I mean,
but a lot of people don't know. I know this is not especially on the shed industry, but it's, I think, maybe somewhat relevant. Walmart has actually got one of the best online retail brands going on.
They're going to be the number one.
In the world.
Yeah. They'll be the one to compete with Amazon.
They're investing in AI like you wouldn't believe. We had one of our CEO summits recently. We had a Walmart exec come in and speak, and it's incredible to blow your mind. And you think of them being this, sort of tired brick and mortar store with a bunch of minimum wage employees.
Yeah.
They're really, they're becoming a very, very strong retail organization online.
And those reasons are the reasons that people get frustrated is the minimum wage, the cutoff at 30 hours, not wanting to provide
benefits,
health insurance and benefits, and taking the mom and pops out of.
So there's an example of our conversation earlier. There's a law, and they're taking advantage of it.
Yes.
They don't work past 30 hours. That way it's not a full-time equivalent employee. That way they don't have to provide benefits legally.
Yeah.
And you know what?
Until the court of public opinion matters more.
That's right.
Than the law.
Than the legal court of, that's right. So there's one you can absolutely do, and it's legal. Is it the right thing to do?
Right.
Ethics and core values is a different thing than legal. I just think we should be at least above the legal one, and then you figure out between you and God where you are above that.
Yeah. So I just don't waste my time arguing about the self-checkout thing. Yeah. I'm just like, I don't know. I order my food at the drive-through. You know what I mean? Like, I take my cart back. There's so many things to be upset about them or with them for that it's almost not worth the time.
I'm pretty sure my house uses DoorDash. I get notifications from every now and then.
This is
like every other day or something.
One of the best arguments I had was it's a loss of personal customer service. And I'm like, I'll tell you what, I'll agree with you whenever 9 out of 10 Walmart checkers are pleasant. You know what I'm saying? Because they're getting paid minimum wage, they really don't care.
There's that. But if you're out, my wife just bought a car this past weekend, and if you're buying something you want to touch and feel and see, it's one thing. Yep. But if you're buying Diamond Hills brand, whole grade milk, I don't really care who picks it. If you're buying it from that store, it's going to be the exact same jug of milk you'd have picked out. Now, fresh produce is a little different, but, and we'll see. We'll see how that impacts the shed industry, right, with self-checkout and 3D configurators and all these various things. Yep. Do we ever get to a place of truly just online checkout? I don't know.
What do you like personally? Because personally, even though I partner with a lot of these companies, have them on the show, they do advertising, things like that. I still like brick and mortar, pen and paper.
That's not a good way to start out your introduction. The sponsors on the show, even though I do business with them, but yet me.
So we're gonna edit that. Brent, where's Brent? We gotta edit. So in all reality, I I
like brick and mortar.
The brick and mortar, the pen and paper, and the guy who's very personable, who's probably 50 years old, 60 years old, who just sits at the lot and he's kind of like, yeah, we'll get you a shed.
I mean, for me, it all depends on what I'm buying.
Yeah.
Right. Groceries, let me just go click while I'm, walking in the door at the house, and an hour later it shows up.
I just recognize
a lot of
the
stuff
need
on
for
Amazon. But then we were buying cars. I didn't really compare. Ironically, in this time was
like
an SUV
Carvana
for my wife. I didn't compare between one Ford dealership and another.
Yeah.
But I compared between the brands and the safety ratings and those kinds of things. So that kind of stuff I did online. But then the way it drives, I mean, you got to go drive
the car.
It, right?
We saw, and I've had friends who've ordered cars through like Carvana. We saw 3 semis on the way down here to Texas, loaded completely full Carvana.
My Tesla X, I bought it on my phone. I went to a dealership. They let me go drive one. Not a dealership. They're not dealers. They're showrooms. But I drove the showroom, and then I tried to place the order. Of course, legally, they can't take an order on site because then they're a dealer. And so I had to go on my phone and purchase the car that way. So I mean, it's going to be interesting to see where the world goes. And
I just recognize the change. Like I said, I mean, I still like One Way the best, but there's no doubt that I see the change and the value in it. And actually, it's it's got me out of my shell in terms of like being just a average. I'm going to have a show coming up with like where I interview my mom, interview my dad. I'm going to interview my wife and my kids, and I just hope the industry don't mind giving that to me. It might happen before this one even airs. But if so, like I've already interviewed my mom and dad. I really enjoyed it because they don't know what I do. So I just asked them, hey, you know what I do? And let them ramble, kind of talk about like what we did growing up. And I'm not joking. My dad, blue collar, 6th grade education. If we didn't have anything to do and we're playing on our Game Boy, he would make us go out in the yard to dig a hole and then bury the dirt back in the hole. And I was like, there's no value in this. I don't know why I'm doing this. But his mentality was, you're going to work. You're going to work. It's not an option. That's going to happen.
One way or another,
you're going to have to
digging
work.
Ditches and covering them back up.
Yep.
Got to love your dad.
Yeah. I told him, and we haven't even gotten along our whole lives, right? But I told him I have a better relationship with him now than I've ever had. And I said, thank you. Like, there's one thing I know how to do is work. There is one thing I'm not sure about. If I lose anything and everything, I know how to go work. I mean, I know that's just necessary.
Because we can all agree what you're doing now is not working, right?
I set you up for that. So
you walked into it perfectly, Justin.
I'll take. You can send the check in the mail. It doesn't matter if you pay me here or there. So good. I appreciate.
I love when your passion and your talent intersect. That's your superpower. And Shannon, we've talked about this a couple times. Last couple times you're here. You're definitely in that intersection. Yeah. And I think really doing something you enjoy, it shows. Yeah. You're bringing value to the industry. Otherwise, people won't listen, right? Yeah. That's the ultimate test. And I think your count of listeners is on the rise, so that's a good thing. So it's keep it rocking, keep doing what you're doing. And if you do, there's that song Vacation. If you do what you love, then you're always on vacation. If you don't love it, go change it. Go do something about it. Yeah. And so simple but great advice.
No truer words spoken other than by the one and only Johnathan Ulrich here today. So I hope I live it down at some point. We got to get there's got to be something else come up in the future. Dear Lord, let another disaster come between me and Justin so that I can get away from calling him this over and over and over. I kind of want to tell you the story behind that, but I'll tell you off air.
Okay, sounds good.
Justin
well, thank you, Mark. I've enjoyed being on your show again.
Whatever. Appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thanks, Shannon.
All right.